regions. So as a precursor to Space Command and possible Space Force in the future, we have created Defense Space Agency, and you just heard the Director General of Defense Space Agency views. If a question is asked, does India need Space Force? I think the answer will be overwhelmingly yes, if not unanimous. But what does it take to raise a Space Force? Now, even when the USA has raised it to be an equal force to that of the Air Force, I would like to say that the Space Force comprises only about 9,000 personnel, 4,500 enlisted and 4,500 officers each, as compared to 320,000 active duty personnel of the Air Force and almost equal numbers in reserves and civilians. So that is the disparity even when they have created a separate Space Force. So we can imagine that what does it take and where are we? But what are going to be objectives of these Space Forces? Now, they are certainly not launch and recovery guys, as we would see. They are military. And what we are witnessing is militarization of space. And in my opinion, militarization of space is different from weaponization of space. They may be related or connected, but are not the same. Now, again, quoting from an intervention in one of the sessions I witnessed the other day, it was a very insightful intervention where it was said that space, like land, oceans, and sky above you, is not a zero-sum game. Very interesting. Land and oceans and the sky above you is finite. So either it belongs to you or it belongs to me. The total does not change. However, space is unlimited. For me to have greater influence in space than you, unlike land, I don't have to snatch it from you. There is so much of it available, it is infinite. What do I need? I just need greater presence and larger plan. And now the Space Force proliferated warfighter space architecture, PWSA, what we know, is being built on the theory that its proliferated design would allow the Pentagon to continue operations even if an adversary takes out a few of its satellites. That is having own constellation for internet for security reason. Security of what? The reason given is that the commercial assets may not provide secure and uninterrupted service for military operations. So what are these military operations going to be in space? As the interest grows in space, resources, they will need to be guarded. And who will guard resources in space? Who guards them on Earth for that matter? It is military. So in this session, with predominant military presence, we should look at the space from military point of view and say and see where we are, where we need to go and what does it take to be there. Now coming down to my panelists, let me begin with Mr. Tanveer Ahmed. Okay, he's sitting on the extreme left, who is the CTO of Digantara. He leads and oversees the development of comprehensive SSA technology stack that includes data acquisition and systems, multimodal data processing and fusion, and cutting-edge SSA analytics for the company. Tanveer, may I ask you to take us through what is next in militarization of space?
Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to be here, and thanks for the introduction. Quick about myself, I'm Tanveer. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Digantara. At Digantara, we focus on space surveillance, which entails building ground-based sensors and satellite-based sensors that are capable of tracking other satellites and space debris and any objects that is orbiting in space. Coming to the point of militarization in space and what's next now, I think what Pawan sir and Bedi sir made a couple of interesting points. And I think Bedi sir brought out important thought that there should be a demarcation between militarization of space and militarization of space. And taking that view, anything that is done in space is perceived as military activity because of the nature of space. I think there should be a discussion and understanding what is non-military, because it is given to classify every imaging satellite, every communication satellite as a military satellite. and assume that to be as a situation where launching of these satellite contributes to militarization of space. I think there is something of the understanding of militarization of space. I think fundamentally there are three things that go into militarization of space. First one is surveillance or situational awareness. Second one is defensive countermeasures, and third one is offensive countermeasures. Perhaps the mission Shakti that was covered by the country is on the far right with offensive capabilities. But enemy militarization in any domain, be land, air, sea, the first aspect is to know what's happening. The first aspect is to know what is happening in the domain. The first aspect is to know, is there something in the domain? Is it moving? Is it stationary? Is it making some moves? Is it coming close to me or is it going away to me? I think that is the first layer that has to be mastered for militarization of space. And this can be done in many ways. We are working on a few ground-based systems and space-based systems that can track satellites. And there is one difference when it comes to satellites and other assets and other domains. That is understanding the concept of movement. Satellites are always moving, they're not stationary. Right? So because of that, the definition of stationary changes in space. Here, stationary means not stationary with respect to their positions, but stationary when it comes with respect to their energies. So when a tank moves on a battlefield, its energies changes, it moves from one location to another. But in space, satellites are always moving, and on military perspective, when they're moving, they're pretty predictable. So once you have the surveillance infrastructure in space, it's pretty easy to know where these satellites are there right now and where they will be in the future. So once the surveillance infrastructure part is the situation awareness is in place, the next step is to focus on the concept of having the first move, having the element of surprise in space. So this necessitates to create technologies that can change the energy state in space very quickly. And I think it's time as a country we start focusing on these kind of capabilities. And because overall on the world stage there's a lot of research happening on creating these kind of spacecrafts. And to counter those kind of threats, again, the surveillance systems have to be upgraded to detect these kind of satellites that move pretty frequently. And we transition from militarization of space to something called as dynamic space militarization. I think that is what is the next step in the militarization of space.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. It's very important. Essentially, I mean, space situational awareness is important. We all grew up, while flying. Emphasis on situational awareness, just to know about 3-4 aircraft flying around you, where they are, and then BVR, beyond visual range. The combat came when you had to know who's flying, which you can't see, your radar through ground. And now, of course, the dimensions have increased and we are talking of space, but one important aspect along with SSA is that after you have SSA, then what do you do with it? I mean, the capability needs to be built along with that yes, it is good to know what is where. But if suppose you don't find it or you see what you don't like seeing, then what are you going to do about it? So I think this has to go together. Now, space exploration essentially was military, or with military to begin with. First man in space was after all Major, Yuri Gagarin. Slowly, commercialization of space overtook because of business interests. If the relative number of communication and surveillance satellites is something to go by. I'm not at all saying it's not important, but I'm just drawing the disparity. However, military does not only use imagery from space. As is common belief that whenever anyone talks to military man, he probably thinks he's only looking at images. There are a lot more applications. It has much wider application. For example, simply long-range drones also need SATCOM connectivity. Now, we have with us General Dr. Ashok Kumar, the Kargil War veteran, author of 2 books, China Betrays Again and Indian Journeys on the Global Stage. And he is currently Director General of Center for Joint Warfare Studies. No better man than to tell us about shifting bias of space assets towards military use. From communications to the military use, how is this bias shifting?
Jai Hind everybody. Hope that I am audible. Thank you SIA. Thank you Chair. My focus is going to be to tell you that the space assets, while they are being used for multiple uses, they are now shifting their focus towards the military use. So are you all in agreement with this? If so, my job will get reduced. Are you in agreement that the majority of space assets by most of the countries in the world today are looking at the military uses of these space satellites? Are the other resources, not only the satellites alone? Yes or no? So, okay, you take it, you all agree, so my job becomes a little easier. So, in next 7 minutes, the time initially allocated, I will take you back to close to 7 decades back. When at the far end of the World War II, United States of America launched those two nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there is a belief that probably that was not needed to culminate the war because the troops were already at the Okinawa Island and they could have launched the land operations to culminate the war for a little early and a little late. But what we all have to understand, there was a rush. And why I am talking about this rush? Because it translated thereafter, after the fall of Germany getting segmented into portions, West Germany going the democratic way and East Germany going the communist way. Now all that is part of history and not that relevant. What is relevant here? That the Germany was the most leading country in the world as far as industrialization is concerned at that point of time. And in that, they were the best as far as the rocket technology is concerned. The rocket technology intensification which they had achieved, that was not available with any other country. So with that point of time, there was a rush on part of USA as well as the Soviet Union to poach those scientists who were working in the rocket technology. Because the rocket technology has got a very, very close connect with the space community, which you all are aware of. So, Soviet Union, which had lagged behind in the nuclearization domain, it took lead as compared to USA in the space force. They were first to launch the Sputnik 1 in 1957, followed by Yuri Gagarin going in the space orbit in 1961. In fact, USA got so much worried about this development of USSR in space that they created DARPA, the famous DARPA. And here, that if you read the primary aim of DARPA getting created, it had 3 segments, and all 3 of them were military focused. Not the conventional exploration of the space, getting knowledge, getting communications, getting the mineral details, and so many things which are there for the civilian and humanitarian use. But they took a little time to catch up and then take the lead. And then came the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Though this was the initial countries included the Soviet Union, USA and UK, and today more than 100 countries have signed, including China and India. But while they prohibited the use of nuclear weapons and placing of the weapons of mass destruction in space, and looked at space that it is going to be a resource for the entire humanity for its good. But somewhere along the line, knowingly or unknowingly, they did not insert to prohibit the use of military in the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Thereafter, the lead shifted in favor of USA, and Neil Armstrong was the first one to land on Moon in 1969. And today, as we speak, there are close to 7,000 satellites in the space, including more than 3,000 debris. The initial need to know more about the universe, the inquisitiveness to know more about the planets, Moon, and and so many things, and even looking at the topographical and other features of Earth, looking at the weather, those things were predominant considerations of countries who were exploring the space, though that continues even today. But as I told you right in the beginning, that the space has got a huge connect with the rockets, and that is where the entire technological shift goes in the dual use domain. So it could be used for the civil purposes also, it could be used for military purposes also. And today also it is continuing as a dual use. But then, out of these uses, as you see today, more and more countries are looking at its military utilization. The chair brought out that when we talk of the satellites, we basically look from the military, especially the mapping perspective. He also gave the example of whenever we are looking at the out of sight operations, whether it be in case of drones, UAVs, and any other things, the satellite communications are needed. But the satellite communications have moved a totally different level of tool. I'm sure you all would be aware about the anti-satellite technology, which has already been harnessed by USA, Soviet Union, China, and now even India. And so now, really speaking, in the military domain, these space wars, which was then the movies and other things, that has already started. Though Outer Space Treaty does remain one of the comprehensive treaties out of all the treaties related to space, but as I highlighted, it falls short. And countries like China, who have no respect either for the bilateral agreements or the international agreements, they don't have any meaning to such treaty even if they are signatory. In fact, they have taken pretty close to 15 to 20 years to ratify, having initially being part of this treaty. So today, if you have to map own country for knowing the location of your troops, your infrastructure, planning your operations, especially at the strategic and operational level, if you have to know the enemy's position, its infrastructure development, which can be used for the military purposes, even location of the important forces and resources for war fighting in the adversary, as to when they are crossing, they are coming to close with what kind of force level they are coming. And in all kind of domain, it is not only about the land conflict, it is in the air also, in the air space also, in the water also, in the subsurface also. In the dreamer domain, there is a use of satellites galore. So besides knowing that these firstly satellite itself can be used as targets. The ICBMs, the hypersonic weapons, all those who have to transit from place A to place B, they in any case go to the outer space for their transit. And that transit may be independent of the satellite guidance, or may be assisted by satellite guidance depending on the need and the nature of that particular missile system. So today when we are speaking, countries including us, we have a great aspiration to create capacities. Of course, we are more inclined as a nation for peaceful purposes and supporting our friendly countries in multiple domains. But then these capacities automatically get embedded with the military capabilities, which again, if you see the latest flights and weapon systems which India launched, even that is also a testimony to what is happening around us. With niche technologies now ruling the roots, the companies like the Agnikul, where the rockets can be 3D printed, and with the low cost, these things can be floated in the different kind of Earth orbits or beyond Earth orbits. That is a reality that more and more nations are going to use these things, and as and when they enter there, the conflict of interest is going to take place, and the militarization is also going to increase. In fact, today more than 115 countries have got a specific space-related agency working in their countries, and of course most of them are signatory of this Outer Space Treaty, which to my mind has become irrelevant in today's time. It needs to be updated, and even if it is updated, there is a huge challenge because international organizations, the systems of United Nations, security councils, and number of things we have seen, most of the recent past have fallen apart. So with that, observation, I will close my comment. Basically, restating that while the space capacities remain dual use, that is dependent on the user as to how he or she wishes to use that particular country. But more and more countries are utilizing it for military purpose, whether it can be taken as a defensive purpose, or future preparation for defense, or for offensive purpose, or what will be their national interest. So with that note, I hand the chair and back to you, sir.
Thank you very much. So, now, as we see, the use of space for different services, you would notice that probably Navy will have a different requirement than Air Force different than Army, because probably Navy to spot one ship in large oceans will need a very, very wide swath. But whereas Air Force to locate an aircraft or a small UAV in an airfield will need a different kind of requirement, will have different requirement. Similarly, land forces will have their specific requirements. So next on the panel I have with me General Brar, and who will take us through to space as an enabler for military operations. Specifically for land-centric operations. Now, as in the panel we move from retired officers to the officer in uniform, the people in uniform continuously keep updating. And I have an updated profile of General Brar with me, which is different from what I had noted down. So I would just like to read it out to you. General Brar, vast experience of 28 years. Has done tenures in all kind of terrains in northeast J&K, plains, deserts, etc. But the highlight is that he's a technocrat with expertise in computers and executed many niche tech projects. Lifetime Zoraber design and specifications are his and project driven by him. Round of applause, I think. He signed contract for swarm drones in 2021 and many others. And currently, as GOC-Dakshin Bharat area, he has created a defense ecosystem and guiding startups in IITM Research Park, IISc Bangalore, etc. Over to you, General. Yes, please.
The Chair, General Khandare, Marshal, Bedi, dignitaries on dais, and distinguished guests. Firstly, thanks here for giving me this opportunity. So whenever you talk of military operations, then you think of war. But I think I need to clear this misconception. We heard of peace economy in the inaugural session, especially in a geostrategic environment. If India military is strong, it will act as a deterrent. And you've seen the condition around the world. If the military is weak, actually the wars happen there. So a strong military is equal to peace, the equation which he gave, and peace is equal to economy. So I'll add that plus Dr. Saurabh, I think he is not here, to that equation. So I represent the demand side. We have heard a lot of things from the supply side. But in our case, when we are building this kind of a environmental ecosystem for space, I think the user has to, which I've been mentioning because of the projects which I said, wherever one is involved personally as a user and he can guide the project, he has to give the concept, the operational requirements, and basically the overall design what he wants. Otherwise, somebody will say, I want ISL, like Sir said, what your demand, where, what, and how. So the user has to drive that demand. So in this case, like the topic which I have chosen is, how does the space acts as an enabler for increasing the efficiency and accuracy of military operations, especially land-centric operations. Now, what do you mean by efficiency and accuracy? Space, unless it is weaponized, which it is not, and neither we are hoping it will, the destruction is caused by Army-Navy efforts. You have non-kinetic domains which are space, the EM spectrum, the cognitive domain. They don't cause destruction, they increase the efficiency. So the space as an efficient medium to increase is immense. So let me justify this by giving you some physical examples. So we know the various domains which are there. The Air Force, Navy, Army, EM spectrum, cognitive, all are working in silos. But space is one domain which can encompass all of these domains. And if it can encompass, obviously it's overlooking Army, Navy, Air Force. Your ESM operations can be launched through space. Your cognitive assets, your TV, media, information system can be launched. Your ISS through space. So therefore, space should not be treated as a separate medium. In fact, it should be an overarching medium. And if it becomes an overarching medium, it can integrate resources. And that is what I'll mention to General Khandare. This is what is theaterization. The concept of organizing physically should change to organizing it functionally and through software. So, it will make things simpler and also reduce the friction which we are generally having on. So, this is the advantage of space. Secondly, AVM, he just mentioned about multi-domain. Again, if you are theaterized, the multi-domain operations actually, we think of multi-domain Air Force Navy again in silos. But space will be able to, from Air Force, it will be able to direct operations against some land requirement. It will be able to generate the ESM support from somewhere to the Navy, or it can generate anything. So the cross-domain operations can only happen if you have the space as an enabler. So I am giving you the broad concepts. I will continue with that. In a military operations, there are 3-4 things which are required. Where am I? Where are my forces? Where is the enemy? And what this information has to be transmitted to my command. All these 3 functions can be done by space. Where am I? PNT. Where are my forces? PNT. Where is the enemy? The ISA. And what this information to my command and control structure. So, the military operation will be efficient. We heard General Pannu, I think yesterday speaking, there was a patrol which went across. And he didn't know. And obviously, there were casualties. But if you have the information, and sometimes there's speculative, we had such a certain situation about 3-4 years back, a speculation could have led to a war. But that's how you increase the efficiency when you know that exactly what the information is. So, continuing with more examples, Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things is on ground. It can be on space. And in space, military operations, the net centricity is what will integrate everything. The example which I'm always giving, you have a computer or a mobile phone. If it is on net, it is just a piece of electronics. When it comes on the net, then you have financial banking, ticketing, Uber, Ola, everything working. So similarly, if all our weapon systems are on a net, we become efficient. And again, it is a space which will enable all of this. You don't need expensive F-35 or all those multi-billion-dollar programs. You just need to integrate the current systems. They have to be upgraded to be brought on net. So, Internet of Things, net centricity is the other one. And the thing which we have been discussing, sensor to shooter link, kill chain, kill web, that's again a different subject. So, you can organize because, your wars are happening in specific areas. So it is the space which can dominate a certain border area where the conflict is happening, which is happening around the world. On that, and we heard of Starlink and other things. Now let me come to land-centric. Somehow space, because it is in space, we say it is. But I think every lecture which we have heard today, everybody is talking of information as from land. So actually, we in the army, we think it is not our job. But I think most of the things which are required are for the army because the PNT, as far as Navy and Air Force are concerned, even a commercial aircraft is in communication, his location is known and he knows what's happening, the radars are on. So is with the Navy, they have a maritime domain awareness. It is the army people, on land people who don't know. So actually they need space the most. And the second thing is, when the army mobilizes or when we are involved, our terrestrial systems only come up when there are hostilities. But that is too late. So we need a data library which is functional 24/7 and that again can come through space. And that was also discussed in the morning that our ISR systems And then we have currently there is nothing called peace and war. There is kind of a grey zone which is always happening. So the grey zone will happen with only non-kinetic means, which is again your ISR has to be functional, your EM has to be functional, your cyberspace and cyber warfare systems have to be functional. Then coming to stuff, I'll just give you broad. In a northern border, it's a public knowledge, the heights and the weather conditions there, the terrestrial system don't work. So even if we lay something there or do something, so it is again space which is required. And of course, for the civil audience, when you are in a commercial space, you are searching the whole country for something. But for defense, and especially for land forces, we have specific areas. We'll give you that this is the area and this is what we are looking for. So that kind of a building up thing can be seen. Now what is required, I will just take 2 minutes. All the things have been discussed. So as far as PNT is concerned, we as the Indian Army or Indian Armed Force, we definitely had to transit to NAVIC and IRNSS. Because the advanced land navigation system and the GPS conversion to IRNSS I did when I was DJ on board. But it is not, again, the point for defense advisor, it is not gone in rest of the army. So this needs to be pushed because your IRNSS is more secure, more reliable, obviously, and more accurate than all the systems which are existing in the world. The specs I can't give. As far as ISR and all, we have talked, small satellites, VODO and all the things, there are satellites which can be swarming, RPOs, but as far as ISR are concerned, multi-fusion, hyperspectral, ELINT, comment, all these requirements are there, but these requirements have to be specific, and as I said, the user has to get involved and give them specific things. As for launch command, we just said a thing. I just asked that question also. A mobile launch system is what will be required in an operational area, and RPOs would be required, HAPs of course would be required, and something in a ground control station. Now I think the first day we had direct to handset. So a direct to handset will obviate all the problems with the signals in the army or armed forces faces. Or direct to a mobile GCS. So direct to mobile GCS again in operational areas will be a game-changing event, and all this actually needs to be on a AI/ML platform with edge computing, where because we had ISR will come, but as a user I am not looking at problems. I am looking at something which will give me where the enemy, all this thing needs to be collated, including from your other inputs which may be coming from the ground. Lastly, just 2 points. Cyber attack actions were discussed, but I think I will suggest there is a urgent requirement of sandboxing all because most of the operators will be using POTS equipment, and like I was engaging with somebody in IT, he said Motorola mein I think some chip number ESP42, I am forgetting, I'll let you know, sir. That chip is already compromised and vulnerable, which is a Chinese chip. So when the things happen, it will be used, its vulnerability will be exploited. So we need to sandbox each and every situation, space which is in a space domain we just talked. But again, to give you a use case requirement for space, we know our adversary satellite is transiting. We know the gaps. So the gap and the dark spot should be known, because if you have to plan our operation, we should know where are the places where. So SSA is very important, apart from what debit collection and other things. So anything which is being done actually by civil can be made into a use case and made into a project. And my last point, how do we get it? We had a discussion in the morning. All these things are not individual things, but most of the companies are focused. But there needs to be a kind of a thing from the user who decides a framework or a system, and these things cannot be through normal procurement as a L1 tender. It has to be a project which is driven as a SPV as I suggested, or a thing which is pushed as a project. in all these 3-4 areas, and there are options given to 2-3 of these consortiums or collaborations which come up. And still the last point, the space for human skill we need in the armies, and that we talked in the mornings. That's all. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think you made about 6 last points. You know what? It's very important. I mean, just to give an example, we are celebrating Silver Jubilee of Kargil. Coming in July. Okay, I myself participated in Kargil Ops. We were 25 live missions from Srinagar. And I can relate that if we had submetric resolution satellites then going around the way they are going around now, how would a Kargil play? What kind of resources we would have expended, how many people would have been murdered, etc., etc. So it's a great game changer that we have. Now, actually, you would find in the program that we were supposed to have 2 more panelists. We were supposed to have Admiral Chauhan with us, from the Navy. And unfortunately, it is ironical, and sir, to borrow if it's not a copyright statement, we were wondering, and he sent a apologetic message that because of torrential rains, he could make it. And I said it's an irony that a naval officer can't get out of his house because of water blocking in front of his house. So anyway, that's one thing. But I'm going to request General Khandare because we collectively have heard him in many conferences, and he probably would know that what is going to be said in maritime. But just out of interest, he sent me a central point. He said I must read it out for him. And he says that the next 2 centuries are going to be centuries of sea and space. In the course of these 200 years, India will either be a space and maritime power or no power at all. Typical of naval officer. And he says if India has to achieve its economic goal of moving from $3 trillion economy to $30 trillion one, this can only happen through exploitation of the maritime domain or port-led development, etc., etc. And he essentially would probably have spoken about that how space assets are going to help in that. But in his absence, sir, may I request you to throw light on this.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, in the first avatar of Admiral Vinod. Now, as far as Navy is concerned, the maritime power that India desires to be and is destined to be, there are certain gaps which we need to look at. And first of all, we look at underwater domain awareness. And in underwater domain awareness, normally a weaker force will always rely on the submarines. The stronger ones normally flaunt the aircraft carriers and the huge flotilla which accompanies them. But after what we have seen, the missile capability and potency which China has already developed, I think one of the major requirements is to develop the submarine force. So what are we looking at? The submarines have a major problem related to communication. Very low frequency, and that is something where so far space domain has not been able to help, or the space assets have not been able to help. On the land part, the space communication is quite good. This is a challenge for the academia, this is a challenge for the startups to look at, research on how can we develop communication. Now this is a question of physics, so I am not getting too much into it, but I leave it to the academia that how can very low frequency, the kind of communication which submarines use. So that is the first gap. The second gap is monitoring of the choke points. That is how Navy normally functions. So we have on both lines a number of choke points, and also this will get complicated more with the number of bases of China coming around us. So there has to be a continuous monitoring of that. As a naval officer, the naval fleet of China will also have to be monitored at their various ports. So these are certain absolute required information which we always want. So if from Hainan submarine base, submarine has sailed, we obviously want to know. If they've crossed Malacca or they've crossed Lombok or Mumbai Vitar, then we must know. If they are at Gwadar, we must know. If they are at Djibouti, we must know. How many ships are out at any point in time? Obviously, that is what the Navy would always want to know. Now, there is a difference between the requirements of the Army, Navy, Air Force. Generally, Army and Air Force would look at a particular kind of a resolution, submetric resolution. The Air Force will look at targets which are deeper because they want to monitor the airports, the airfields, and they would try to locate the fighter aircrafts or the strategic bombers. So as you look at strategic bombers, they are further in depth. You look at fighter squadron, they are possibly the first or the second line of airfields which are integrated. Army wants to look at more in the tactical battle area and deeper when they have to locate the mobilization. But still, the submetric resolution required by the Air Force and the Army is similar. But Navy requires something different. The huge expanse of the ocean all over requires a wide swath. And even a course resolution up to 30 meters or 50 meters is good enough because the grey hull ships are of that particular size. So that is the understanding which the industry also must have. When you are looking at the future space-based surveillance programs, now most of the space-based surveillance programs which are enunciated by the armed forces and then subsequently coordinated at the NSCS and then given to either ISRO or maybe in future, that is where the DGDSA comes, that he should possibly be demanding that, okay, this is what we want. So in that, there are many things which are brought out. The number of satellites, the kind of payload that it has, the kind of orbits that we want, the number of Earth stations that we want, the mobile receiving stations that we want. So all that becomes a part of what is put in the SBS program. And from SBS program comes out what the industry is looking at. The number of satellites, the different kinds of payload, the characteristics of the payload, and Navy will obviously want a different kind of communication setup, and they were the first, in fact, to look for communication satellites because they have to sail far and wide. Currently, there is another challenge that Navy has, which is related to NAVIC. NAVIC has limited coverage, while Indian Navy has been sailing all across. So the moment they get out to the coverage area of NAVIC, then per force they have to depend on the GPS, Galileo or GLONASS. So that NAVIC needs to be upgraded in terms of the area of coverage. So that is one priority which Indian Navy has been asking for. Even the Indian Air Force and Indian Navy both are looking at wider coverage of NAVIC because in the last couple of years you would have seen the kind of operations which our security forces have launched for recovering our diaspora. There are about 80 million Indian diaspora all over the world. And if you have to be a muscle flexing power, then you better look at your own NAVIC, which enables you to move and not get located because you are dependent on the GPS. So that is one more ask which Indian Navy would have. Indian Navy is also looking at participating actively as a part of the national agenda in the Arctic policy. So even that part will require more capabilities, and specifically in terms of the ISR and in terms of communication. Here regarding ISR, I wanted to leave a thought with all of you. We've all been downloading things from the West. We say intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. As a military professional, General Pannu, Marshal Bedi, in fact, Marshal Chopra is in the gathering. You all would agree, this is not the way we function. We actually do surveillance first, then reconnaissance, and then information, and based on that comes intelligence. And that's a very good acronym for Indian SRI. That is easy to remember also. So if we are able to correct this misconception and do a branding, it will do us good. So as far as Navy is concerned, I have very broadly covered what the ask of Indian Navy would be, and in collaborative operations, in collaborative exercises, it is always good to have your own systems functioning rather than to borrow the partner Navy. Okay. Now coming to summing up of this particular panel discussion, you heard each one a historical context given by one speaker, Dr. Ashok. You heard the Air Force part spoken by Marshal Bedi. You heard General Brar giving out the not only the army context but grander design. You had the industry giving out about SSA. You had the DG, DSA giving out what his perceptions are. Now let me just tell you, when we look at the Space Force as such, when in 2019 the Space Force for USA got announced, we were surprised. The CNC of Space Force visited India. I do not know why. In fact, I am still wondering why did he visit us. But obviously he visited us, interacted with all of us, and we queried him as to how they were going to do it. And at the same time, even France went in for a similar exercise, and their CNC also visited us. What is important to see in both these countries is they were very clear-headed as to what they want to do and in what timeline they want to do. And within a year, they both visited again and they had completed the visit. Why is it important? It's always good to be honest and candid in front of your own country. We have created a space agency, the CCS note, which was approved in October 2018. We did complete its raising to some extent in 2019, and we have had 2 DGs so far, and the third one is on the stage with you. Are we completely there? Maybe we need to do much more. What is our dream for a space command? So the journey started with a small space cell in IDS. Each of the service had its own segment of space section, and thereafter we went in for an agency, then do we go for a command, then do we go for a force. Obviously it is based on what you need, how do you perceive the future. General Brar very clearly explained, and one of the articles General Pannu has also mentioned, you have to now start looking at this entire area as a battle space. If you look at the battle space, how do you use your resources as per the desired effect and in the most optimum way? Who is required to do what? And who is the best suited for that? I think that is a call which we all need to look at without looking at the color of the uniform or without any particular bias. If we are able to decide that we need a space force for the future, then we must know what will the space look like in future for us. Currently, we are only looking at surveillance and communication satellites. What are we wanting space for? We will possibly be looking at a space station, we will be looking at a space lab, we will be looking at manufacturing facilities, whether we take agriculture there, whether we are looking at asteroids mining. It's just that how far your imagination can go and how much you can make it happen. If you are looking at space colony, then who's going to secure them? In fact, the term militarization also could be broadened to securitization. So whether we need a different kind of a security for these assets, and whether it can go beyond the military domain or short of military domain, that is something again which we have to debate. It's always good to have brainstorming, have ideating sessions, and ideating sessions are most ideally done in a very closed door session. So maybe after this broad-based discussion which we have, which is more of one-sided discussion or discourse, I think we possibly may look at going in for a smaller focus group for ideating session, and in that, starting from SSA, going to PNT, communication, going to even futuristic requirements, we should come and decide on what we should be doing. So I think I will end my talk here, and I think Marshal Bedi could possibly seek some questions if there is time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, question. Okay, there is another. Please.
So my question is to the panel, firstly, very well conducted, sir. Compliments to all of you. So the topic is space force dynamics shaping the future of military ops. Now going into the previous operations, where we have seen the US-Afghan war, the Tora issue, or the Russia-Ukraine war, or the Gaza-Israel war, despite the technical and technological superiority these nations enjoy, what is lacking in their operations where the operations continue to be as they are?
Yeah, okay. Take for example, specifically, look at Israel-Hamas. You know what is lacking and what is desired from the space domain. The basic payload of being able to detect tunnels is lacking. Most of the hostages are there. Israel is one of the technological powers. They have tried their level best to locate them. They have used various technologies to be able to flush out people from the underground tunnel, which they have failed. Why do you think there is so much of carnage in Gaza? It's because they are not able to get to the entire layout of the tunnel. So that is one, that is ground penetration. Similarly, we have a challenge in most of our combat areas. The terrorists or the adversary makes use of foliage to cover. Even today, foliage penetration payload is missing. People have been claiming that they have foliage penetration payloads. We have tried it out, it doesn't work. So, if we want to see better ground operation, and these payloads obviously have to be either on drones, either on low Earth orbit satellites, in whatever manner that you want to have. If these were available, things would have been better. Now, in the Russia-Ukraine battlefront, it is different. There, a large amount of action from one superpower onto some a poor cousin in that sense, but backed by the West. So, if Ukraine is denied surveillance, then NATO or US immediately comes up and launches satellites and they are able to get it. So there it's a different story because everything is on the surface. So two different areas, two different requirements, and I have added the Indian requirement of foliage penetration. And I mentioned in my talk earlier that submarine detection, submarine communication. Now these are huge challenges which we need answers for. And not only answer, we need to bring that equipment into usage.
Just add on, Marshal Bedi mentioned about maritime domain awareness and spotting ships in the oceans. And Khandare also mentioned about having a larger SWOT as far as maritime domain awareness is concerned. I'll just report what China is doing, sir, in this regard. What they are doing, sir, they are having constellations of EO, SAR, and LA satellites. Each constellation is 3 satellites, each satellite looking at 30 degrees. So each constellation is looking at about say 90 degrees and covering the entire globe. So once a movement is picked up by an alien satellite, it is transferred to either a EO or a SAR satellite, and thereafter there is a continuous surveillance and continuous monitoring, transferring to satellite and constellation to constellations.
Actually, our wish list, MOCA, is a little different also. When we have a satellite today in the polar orbit that is moving from north to south, and our interest is to locate more in Tibet. Once a satellite takes an image, it goes 470 kilometers before it takes another image. And that, at least you, me, then Brar and then Kumar will agree, or even then Ashok will agree that 470 kilometers could well mean a division. So if you pick up one target, you miss it. So what a wish list has been is to have a single platform with both EO and SAR, payloads on board, AI-enabled, edge computing, and a cluster convoy or constellation, whatever you want to call it, where at least 6 to 7 satellites of a lighter weight but similar characteristics. So the first one, when it takes an image, it is at the first place. And every 20, 30, 40 kilometers, it can, the communication can be done, the command can be given, and imagery can be, in a way, either as a video stream or as spot images every 20, 30, 40 kilometers, so that you don't miss out. And that's exactly what others have to understand. You obviously know that army targets are so closely located, you cannot afford to miss even one target. But the current methodology is, after you've taken one, 470 kilometers, and the revisit is not there. So that is the reason why in our futuristic programs, we have designed it differently. And edge computing is most essential because the bandwidth for the downlink is again required to be conserved. So even that is one of the issues.
So just to reassure you, this depends you absolutely right. In the sense, firstly, another neighbor, yes, there is no doubt whatever you say. But as far as killing and killing is concerned, as far as reducing this gap is concerned, as far as reducing the inter-image distance is concerned, as far as inter-satellite links are concerned, the transferring of data from one satellite to another and reducing this entire chain. So whatever the futuristic satellite programs are there, most of that is included. Rather, most of it is already part of IDEX program, and most of the contracts are also in place. Yes, we will also agree on this is a time-consuming process. This will not happen overnight, but I think we are on the right track and quite a fast.
Next question.
My name is Ashok Kumar, and I have some humble comments to Vinod, and also some comments on submarine communications. The point that Ashok Kumar had made was the historical significance between Germany, rockets, and things like that. So I'd like to point out that one of the challenges that England faced in the Second World War was where the V-2 rockets that Germany was sending to them. And the architect or the scientist was Brar, and he finally, the US got him after the war, and he designed the Saturn rocket to put man on the moon. The other point is that the NASA center that produces the most satellites in the US is 25 kilometers away from the Naval Research Lab. and they were the people who were building the first satellites in the private space. So the takeaway is that defense can in fact lead the way to space and lead the space regime. My second point was really related to the submarines. I think it has been demonstrated that submarines can communicate with satellites through lasers. The other technique is that if an airplane has a 200-meter long antenna, it can communicate at low frequencies with the submarine, and the airplane can then communicate with the satellites. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a wonderful audience. May I request you to join me in sending a round of applause for all the panelists for their contribution. Special thanks to Khandare for chairing the session and giving his insights, and of course, the Marshal who will take out his valuable time. He's always in very high demand. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for an insightful and an enriching session. We'll go ahead with the felicitation ceremony. I request the chair to kind of felicitate the moderator and the panelists. We'll start with Air Marshal Bedi. We have Indian Pawan Kumar. Lieutenant General Karanbir Brar. Major General Dr. Ashok. And Mr. Tanveer. We call upon Lieutenant General Pawan to kindly felicitate the chair, Lieutenant General Vinod. Together we can have one big group picture as well. Everybody. Thank you very much.